Blood tastes like old copper pennies, and regret. That's the last lingering thought before the monitor flatlines. The betrayal wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion. It was the quiet, rhythmic scratch of a fountain pen as a sister and a fiance signed away a life's work at a hospital bedside. Then comes the violent jolt, a sudden, tearing gasp, the sharp scent of expensive gardenias. Not a sterile hospital ward, but a sunlit bedroom. The board is reset. Dying is a profoundly undignified experience. You lose control of your bladder. Your breath rattles in your chest like loose change in a dryer. And the people you love most stare at you with impatience, masking their pity. My last memory in that sterile, bleach-smelling room was Christine's hand. Her nails were painted a flawless, glossy crimson. She was holding a stack of legal documents. Beside her stood Tristan. He didn't even look at me. He was staring out the window at the rain, jingling his car keys in his pocket. The rhythmic clink, clink, clink was the soundtrack to my lungs filling with fluid. I couldn't speak. I couldn't scream that they had poisoned me, systematically, over a year. I could only watch as Christine guided my trembling, skeletal fingers to sign the transfer of Hayes Logistics over to Tristan. And then, the heavy, suffocating darkness. The darkness didn't last. It shattered with a sound like a gunshot, and my eyes ripped open. I didn't wake up gracefully. I bolted upright, my lungs expanding so fast it physically hurt, pulling in great, greedy gulps of air. I threw myself over the side of the bed, my bare knees hitting cold, hard hardwood, and vomited violently onto a Persian rug. Acid burned the back of my throat. I stayed on my hands and knees, chest heaving, staring at the mess. Breathe. My hands were shaking. I held them up. They weren't the bruised, needle-tracked hands of a 30-year-old dying of mysterious organ failure. The skin was smooth. The veins were quiet. There were no IV tapes peeling away my epidermis. I wiped my mouth with the back of my wrist and dragged myself up, my legs feeling like wet sand. The room was spinning. I stumbled into the master bathroom, gripping the edges of the marble vanity. The fluorescent vanity lights flickered, buzzing like an angry hornet. I stared into the mirror. Harper Hayes, 25 years old. My cheeks were full, flushed with an aggressive, terrifying health. My collarbones didn't jut out like broken porcelain. My hair was thick and heavy against my shoulders, not falling out in dry, brittle clumps. I turned the brass faucet. The water came out freezing. I cupped it in my hands and splashed my face over and over until the front of my silk pajamas was drenched, sticking uncomfortably to my chest. It's Tuesday. A thought drifted into my panicked brain. It's the Tuesday before the Hayes anniversary gala. I knew this because of the dress. It was hanging on the back of the bathroom door in a clear plastic garment bag, an emerald green silk slip dress, the exact dress I wore 5 years ago when Tristan got down on one knee in front of 400 industry executives and asked me to be his wife. The exact night Christine got drunk, slipped into the catering kitchen with him, and started the affair that would end my life. I slid down the bathroom wall, the cold tiles biting through my thin pajamas, and brought my knees to my chest. I didn't feel like a brilliant tactician. I didn't feel a sudden, cinematic surge of righteous vengeance. I felt sick. I felt deeply, profoundly violated. The phantom sensation of Tristan's cold lips on my forehead while I lay dying clashed violently with the reality of him sleeping in his apartment across town, probably texting me a generic, Good morning, beautiful. I pulled my phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up. October 12th, 2021. 5 years. I had 5 years of my life handed back to me like a cruel joke. A text chimed. It was Christine. Morning, sis. So excited for tonight. We're going to look amazing. Love you. My thumb hovered over the screen. A wave of pure, unfiltered hatred surged up my throat, tasting like the bile I had just thrown up. I wanted to drive to her apartment. I wanted to wrap my hands around her perfect, delicate throat and squeeze until her eyes bulged. I wanted to hurt her until she felt the exact, creeping paralysis that had consumed my body in that hospital bed. But I closed my eyes. The rage was too hot. It would burn me out. If I burned, they won. I typed back, "Love you too. Can't wait." I dropped the phone on the tiles. It made a sharp, echoing clatter. I stayed on the floor for another hour, listening to the hum of the city waking up outside my window, letting the reality of my pulse anchor me to the present. The game was exactly the same. The pieces were in their starting positions, but I knew exactly how they were going to move. The ballroom of the St. Regis smelled like roasting tenderloin, melted butter, and the suffocating perfume of 300 wealthy people pretending to like each other. The sequins on the bodice of my emerald gown scratched the sensitive skin on the inside of my arms. I adjusted the fabric, my fingers slightly clammy. The noise of the room, a low, chaotic hum of clinking glasses, forced laughter, and a string quartet playing something aggressively classical, grated on my nerves. Every time someone bumped my shoulder, I flinched. The body I was in remembered health, but my brain was still wired for the fragility of a hospital bed. "Harper." The voice sent a physical shockwave down my spine. I stiffened, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I turned slowly. Tristan. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne. He wore a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His jaw was square, his dark hair swept back, his eyes, that familiar, warm amber. He looked like the hero of a romance novel. He looked like the man who had watched me suffocate. "You look—" He paused, his gaze dropping to my neckline and slowly rising back to my eyes. A practiced, intimate look. "You look incredible. Completely devastating." He held out a crystal flute. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Our fingers brushed. His skin was warm. I expected it to feel like ice. In my head, I saw him standing by the hospital window, jingling his keys. I blinked hard, forcing the double vision away. "Thank you," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I took a massive swallow of the champagne. The bubbles burned the back of my throat, but the alcohol immediately started taking the edge off the panic. "Are you all right?" Tristan frowned, a perfect imitation of concern. He reached out to tuck a stray piece of hair behind my ear. I had to force every muscle in my body not to recoil. "You're shaking. Too much coffee today." "Just overwhelmed," I lied, offering a tight, plastic smile. "Big night for the company. Big night for us too," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes scanning the room over my shoulder. And there she was. Christine breezed through the heavy double doors, a vision in pale pink chiffon. She was 22, freshly graduated, dripping with an innocent, wide-eyed charm that made older men want to protect her and older women want to mother her. She caught sight of us, and her face lit up. "Harper, Tristan!" She practically skipped over. The cloying scent of vanilla hit me a second before she threw her arms around me. I held my breath, patting her back mechanically. Her hair brushed my cheek. "Oh, you look so gorgeous," Christine gushed, pulling back and holding me at arm's length. Then she turned her attention to Tristan. "And you clean up okay, I guess." She playfully swatted his arm. It was a tiny gesture. To anyone else, it was just sibling-in-law banter. But I was looking closely now. I saw the way Tristan's chest puffed out slightly. I saw the microsecond their eyes locked, a shared, silent spark of recognition. I saw the way Christine's pinky finger subtly brushed against his cufflink as she pulled her hand away. My stomach dropped. I felt dizzy. I took another aggressive gulp of champagne, draining the glass. They're already doing it, I realized. The emotional affair. The flirting. It didn't start tonight. Tonight is just when they physically cross the line. "Slow down, Harp," Tristan chuckled, taking my empty glass. "The night's young. I'm going to get another," I said abruptly, turning on my heel. I didn't wait for a response. I walked fast, my heels sinking slightly into the thick carpet, weaving through the crowd until I reached the bar. "Vodka neat," I told the bartender. I leaned heavily against the mahogany bar, staring at my own reflection in the mirrored wall behind the liquor bottles. I looked terrified. This wasn't how the Reborn heroines acted in the movies. They were supposed to be cool, calculated, sipping wine and delivering witty, devastating one-liners. But I was sweating through my silk dress. The urge to scream, to flip a table, to smash a bottle, and drag the jagged edge across Tristan's perfect jawline was a physical itch under my skin. "Ground yourself," I thought fiercely. "Look at the room. Look at the money." My father, Richard Hayes, was at the center table, laughing with the board of directors. He looked tired. The company was transitioning. In exactly 20 minutes, he was going to take the stage and announce his early retirement due to health issues. In the original timeline, that was the moment Tristan proposed to me, cementing his place in the family just before the power vacuum opened up. I had been so overwhelmed with the proposal, so blinded by the ring and the applause, that when the board met on Monday to discuss my father's successor, I meekly suggested Tristan take the COO position, while I remained VP of Marketing. I handed him the keys to the kingdom, because I thought we were building a kingdom together. I downed the vodka. It burned going down, leaving a trail of fire in my chest. The microphone squealed. The string quartet stopped playing. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father's voice boomed over the speakers. The room quieted, a sea of faces turning toward the stage. I felt a warm hand on the small of my back. Tristan had found me. Christine was standing right beside him, holding her own glass of champagne, her eyes fixed on my father. My father gave his speech. It was identical to the one I remembered. The history of Hayes Logistics, the trucking routes, the supply chain victories, and then the pivot, his health, his stepping down. The murmurs rippled through the crowd. And then, right on cue, Tristan's hand left my back. He took 2 steps backward, creating a circle of space around us. People turned to look. The murmurs shifted from business to curiosity. I looked down. He was on one knee. He pulled a velvet box from his jacket. The diamond caught the chandelier light, fracturing it into a dozen sharp, tiny rainbows. "Harper," Tristan said loudly, projecting his voice so the nearest tables could hear. "You are the heart of this company and the heart of my life. Will you marry me?" The crowd gasped. Several women cooed. I looked to my right. Christine was standing there, her hands clasped over her mouth in feigned shock, but her eyes were tight. The muscles in her jaw were locked. She was jealous. She was furiously, violently jealous. In the previous life, I had burst into tears, dropped to my knees, and kissed him. This time, I looked down at him. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The smile on Tristan's face began to look slightly strained. The crowd's cooing faded into a confused hush. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it might crack my ribs, but the vodka was doing its job. A strange, heavy calm descended over me, freezing the panic into something hard and jagged. I didn't cry. I didn't drop to my knees. I extended my left hand. "Yes, Tristan," I said, my voice entirely flat, loud enough to be heard. "I accept." He blinked, clearly thrown by my lack of emotion. But he quickly recovered, sliding the ring onto my finger and standing up to embrace me. The room erupted into applause. He hugged me tight, burying his face in my neck. "I love you," he whispered. "I know," I whispered back, staring over his shoulder directly at Christine. She offered me a watery, tight smile. I gave her one right back. Let them think they have me, I thought, the cold metal of the ring heavy on my finger. Let them dig their own graves. Monday morning. The Hayes Logistics corporate headquarters smelled like stale air conditioning, floor wax, and the distinct, sour odor of anxiety sweat. The boardroom was on the 40th floor. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking a bleak, gray skyline of the city. The massive mahogany table in the center of the room was surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs. When I pushed the door open, the chairs squeaked as the board members turned to look at me. Tristan was already there. He was sitting on the right side of the table, near the head, looking relaxed. He wore a crisp white shirt, no tie, looking every bit the modern, capable executive. He was chatting with Anthony Pendleton, the CFO, laughing at some golf joke. When he saw me, he smiled, tapping the empty leather chair next to him. "Morning, Fiance," he said, the word rolling off his tongue with a practiced ease. "Morning," I replied curtly. I didn't sit next to him. I walked past his chair, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, and pulled out the chair at the absolute head of the table, my father's chair. The room went dead silent. The squeak of leather stopped. Tristan's smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated confusion. "Harper?" Anthony said delicately, clearing his throat. "Richard isn't joining us today, but that's the chairman's seat." "I am aware, Anthony," I said, sitting down. The leather groaned under me. I placed my leather portfolio on the table, unzipped it, and took out a sleek, black Mont Blanc pen. I laid it perfectly parallel to the edge of the wood. The sensory details of the room, the dry erase markers smelling of alcohol, the hum of the projector, the slight scratchiness of my wool blazer, were hyper-real. I felt entirely present. I wasn't shaking anymore. The weekend had burned the fear out of me, leaving only a cold, sharp focus. The door opened again, and the remaining board members filed in, taking their seats with hesitant glances at me. Tristan was staring at me, his jaw working slightly. He leaned forward. "Harp, what are you doing?" he hissed under his breath, keeping a pleasant mask on for the others. "We talked about this. You were going to pitch me for the interim COO spot today. We had talked about it. Yesterday, in his apartment, while he cooked us a celebratory brunch, he had smoothly, brilliantly manipulated the conversation, making it seem like my idea that he take the operational reins while I focused on the big picture in marketing. I had nodded. I had smiled. I had eaten his dry, scrambled eggs and planned his absolute ruin. I ignored him, looking up at the board. "Gentlemen," I started, my voice ringing out clear and hard. "As you know, my father's early retirement leaves a significant operational vacuum. Hayes Logistics is entering Q4, our heaviest season. We don't have time for a prolonged executive search, nor do we have time for inexperienced leadership to learn the ropes." Anthony leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Which is why we need to discuss an interim appointment for Chief Operating Officer. Tristan has been overseeing the West Coast expansion. The West Coast expansion is currently 6% over budget and facing 3 separate union grievances." I interrupted. The air in the room sucked out. Tristan physically recoiled, his face flushing a dark, ugly red. "Harper, those grievances are standard negotiating tactics. They are operational failures resulting from poor ground-level communication." I cut him off, not raising my voice, but letting it drop to a dangerous low register. I opened my portfolio and slid a stack of stapled packets down the length of the table. I spent the weekend reviewing the localized reports. The West Coast hub is hemorrhaging capital on inefficient routing. The board members picked up the packets, the sound of rustling paper filling the tense silence. "So," I continued, folding my hands on the table, "I am not recommending Tristan for the COO position." Tristan stared at me like I had just grown a second head. His hands, resting on the table, curled into fists. "Harper, we discussed this. We are a team. We are engaged to be married, Tristan. That is personal. This table is professional," I said, meeting his amber eyes. There it was, the crack in his perfect facade, a flash of genuine, venomous anger. It was the same look he had given me in the hospital room when I was coughing too loudly and ruining his phone call. Seeing that look didn't scare me. It fed me. "I am stepping into the role of interim COO, I announced, looking around the table, catching Anthony's eye. "I have grown up in this company. I know the routing algorithms. I know the warehouse foremen by their first names, and unlike my fiance, my last name is on the building." Anthony looked at the packet, then at Tristan, then at me. "It's an aggressive move, Harper. You've primarily handled marketing, because my father asked me to modernize our brand. I did. Revenues are up 22% directly tied to my digital overhaul. The brand is secure. The operations are bleeding. I am stopping the bleeding." I picked up my Mont Blanc pen. The metal was cool against my fingers. I unscrewed the cap. "I have already drafted the internal memo," I said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward Anthony. "I need a majority vote from the executive committee to ratify it. All in favor?" Tristan was breathing heavily through his nose. He looked at the men around the table. He was waiting for them to put the silly little girl back in her place. He was waiting for the patriarchy of the boardroom to do his dirty work. But Anthony looked at the data I had provided. Anthony cared about money, not Tristan's ego. Anthony raised his hand. Slowly, 3 other men raised theirs. "A majority. Passed," Anthony muttered, looking slightly shell-shocked. I clicked the pen and signed my name on the authorization form. The scratch of the nib against the heavy paper was the loudest sound in the room. It sounded exactly like the pen Christine had used to sign my life away. I looked up at Tristan. His mouth was in a tight, thin line. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, calculating panic. He had lost his primary angle of attack. "Meeting adjourned," I said softly. I didn't look back as I walked out of the room. I didn't need to. I could feel his eyes burning a hole between my shoulder blades. The game hadn't just changed. I owned the board. The COO's office smelled like lemon polish an old paper. My father had occupied this space for 20 years, and his presence was baked into the heavy oak wainscoting and the worn leather of the desk chair. I was staring at a spreadsheet on my monitor, the blue light harsh against my eyes, when the door opened without a knock. Tristan didn't storm in. That wasn't his style. He closed the heavy door behind him until the latch clicked softly, turning the deadbolt. The sound of that lock sliding into place sent a cold, electric shock straight to my nerve endings. In my past life, that click meant we were alone, meant he was going to wrap his arms around my waist and kiss the back of my neck. Now, it felt like being locked in a cage with a very well-dressed predator. He walked over to the desk, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his slacks. He looked down at me. The amber warmth in his eyes was completely gone, replaced by a flat, unreadable surface. Care to explain what the hell that was? His voice was low, devoid of its usual melodic charm. I gave the board my explanation, Tristan. The West Coast hub is bleeding. I am stopping it. I kept my eyes on the monitor, my fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. If I looked at him, he would see the pulse hammering away in the hollow of my throat. He let out a short, humorless breath. He leaned forward, placing both hands flat on my desk, invading my space. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive cedar. It was the scent I used to bury my face in when I was tired. Now, it made my stomach pitch. We had an agreement, Harper. We made a plan in my apartment yesterday. You made a plan, I corrected, finally swiveling the chair to face him. I kept my expression neutral, locking my jaw. I listened. And then, I made a business decision based on the numbers. You are over budget. You are mishandling the unions. I am securing our future, he snapped, his voice finally cracking the veneer of calm. He pushed off the desk and paced a tight circle on the Persian rug. Do you think Anthony Pendleton gives a damn about you? He voted for you because he wants the family out. He wants to isolate you so he can push a buyout. You played right into his hands, and you humiliated me in front of the executive committee to do it. It was a brilliant pivot. Gaslighting 101. Make me the naive victim of a larger conspiracy. Make him the misunderstood protector. If I hadn't spent a year dying while he drained my bank accounts, I might have believed him. I might have apologized. I can handle Anthony, I said quietly. Tristan stopped pacing. He walked back to my chair, dropping to a crouch so we were at eye level. His expression softened, the hard lines of his face melting into a mask of deep, wounded concern. He reached out and placed his large, warm hand over mine. Harper, look at me. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I forced my hand to remain perfectly still under his. I love you, he whispered, his thumb lightly stroking my knuckles. I propose to you because I want to build an empire with you. But you cannot blindside me like this. We are supposed to be a team. You're stressed. Your dad stepping down. The wedding planning. It's making you erratic. Erratic. The groundwork was already being laid. The narrative of the hysterical, overwhelmed heiress. I'm perfectly fine, Tristan. Are you? The door handle rattled. The deadbolt held. Someone knocked softly. Tristan sighed, squeezing my hand once before standing up and unlocking the door. Christine stood in the doorway, holding 2 large, frosted plastic cups with green straws. She wore a pristine white tennis skirt and a matching sweater tied over her shoulders. She looked like a fresh breeze. She looked like she belonged on a country club brochure. Oh, sorry, am I interrupting? She asked, her eyes darting between Tristan and me. She noticed the tension instantly. Her gaze lingered on Tristan's flushed neck, before snapping to me with a wide, innocent smile. "Not at all," I said, my voice feeling like sandpaper. "I brought smoothies," Christine practically sang, stepping into the office and placing one of the sweating cups on a coaster on my desk. "Kale, spinach, and that new superfood powder you were reading about. You've been looking so tired lately, Harp. I thought you needed a boost." I stared at the green liquid. Condensation dripped down the side of the plastic, pooling on the cardboard coaster. The sickly sweet smell of artificial berry masking bitter greens drifted up to my nose. My lungs seized. The room tilted violently on its axis. It wasn't a memory. It was a physical flashback. The metallic taste in my mouth. The burning sensation in my kidneys. The nights spent sweating through my sheets, my hair falling out in clumps on the pillow. "You've been looking so tired lately, Harp. Drink up." "Harper?" Tristan's voice sounded distant, as if underwater. I gripped the armrests of my chair until my fingernails dug into the leather. I fought the overwhelming urge to sweep the cup off the desk and watch it shatter against the wall. "Not yet. Do not break." I forced a shallow breath through my nose. I blinked, bringing the room back into sharp, agonizing focus. "Thank you, Christine," I said. My voice was a dead, monotone thing. "Just leave it there. I'll drink it later," Christine pouted, her lower lip jutting out perfectly. "But the vitamins settle at the bottom if you don't drink it fresh. Come on, take a sip. I walked 4 blocks to get this." She was pushing. She needed to see me consume it. She needed the psychological victory. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At her clear, unblemished skin. At the way she stood slightly closer to Tristan than a sister normally would. I reached out and picked up the cup. The plastic was freezing cold. I brought the straw to my lips. Christine's eyes tracked the movement, a microscopic gleam of satisfaction settling in her pupils. Tristan was watching too, his arms crossed. I didn't drink. I just let the straw touch my lower lip. "Actually," I said, pulling the cup away, "my stomach is completely raw from the coffee this morning. If I drink this now, I'll be sick in the wastebasket. Put it in the mini fridge for me." I held the cup out to her. Christine's smile tightened, the edges fraying just a fraction. "Are you sure? It's really good for you." "The fridge, Christine. Please." She snatched the cup from my hand, the plastic crinkling sharply under her grip. "Fine. Suit yourself." She marched over to the small refrigerator in the corner and shoved it inside. "I should get back to work," Tristan said smoothly, sensing the strange, toxic current in the room. He walked toward the door, pausing just behind Christine. He didn't touch her, but the air between them seemed to hum. "We'll talk tonight, Harper. Over dinner." "Sure." When the door clicked shut behind them, I didn't move. I waited 3 full minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the office outside. Then I stood up, walked to the mini fridge, and took the plastic cup out. I didn't throw it away. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, pulled out a heavy-duty Ziploc bag, and dropped the entire cup inside, sealing it tight. I wasn't just going to stop them from taking my company. I was going to put them in federal prison. The bridal boutique smelled of lavender and exorbitant wealth. The carpet was a thick, plush cream that swallowed the sound of footsteps, and the lighting was engineered to make everyone look like an angel descending from heaven. I hated it. The air felt thin, suffocating. I sat on a velvet-tufted sofa, sipping sparkling water from a crystal flute. My phone vibrated in my lap. A message from Simon, the forensic auditor I had hired privately off the books 3 days ago. West Coast logistics files received. The rooting shell companies are incredibly sloppy. Give me 48 hours to trace the LLC ownership. I locked the screen and shoved the phone deep into my designer purse. The bait was taken. Tristan had been funneling company money through dummy trucking routes to inflate his own performance metrics and line his pockets. In my previous life, I never looked at the raw data. I trusted his summaries. Harper, what do you think? The velvet curtains of the dressing room pulled back with a dramatic swoosh. Christine stood on the circular pedestal. She was wearing a Vera Wang gown, layers of cascading tulle, a sweetheart neckline, and delicate lace sleeves. It fit her perfectly. It was, ironically, exactly the style of dress I had bookmarked on my iPad months ago. She wasn't the bride. I was, but she had insisted on trying just one on, claiming it was her dream to see how she'd look when her turn came. It's stunning, I said, letting the icy water coat my dry throat. You look beautiful, Christine. She turned to the floor-to-ceiling mirror, running her hands down the bodice. Her eyes were completely glazed over with a narcissistic high. She wasn't imagining her own wedding. She was imagining mine. She was picturing herself standing at the altar next to Tristan, the ring on her finger, the company in her bank account. It just fits so well, she murmured, tracing the lace. Don't you think Tristan would love this style? He always says he likes classic silhouettes. He always says the slip was intentional, a tiny poisoned barb meant to assert dominance, to hint at an intimacy she possessed and I supposedly lacked. I smiled, a slow, terrifyingly calm smile that didn't reach my eyes. He does have a very specific taste, I agreed. You should buy it. Christine blinked, looking at me through the mirror. Buy it. Harper, it's $20,000, and I'm not getting married. Consider it an investment, I said smoothly, leaning back into the velvet sofa. You never know when you'll need to step into a role at a moment's notice. It's always best to be prepared. A flicker of unease crossed her face. For a split second, the innocent facade cracked, and the calculating girl beneath peeked out. She searched my face for sarcasm, for anger, for anything that indicated I knew she was sleeping with my fiancé. I gave her nothing, just a bland, sisterly gaze. She turned back to the mirror, her shoulders stiffening. I think I'll just stick to a bridesmaid dress for now. Whatever makes you comfortable, I replied, standing up. I need to take a call outside. Take your time changing. I walked out of the boutique, the harsh glare of the midday sun hitting me the moment I stepped onto the pavement. The city noise was deafening after the hushed quiet of the shop. Honking cabs, the smell of roasted nuts from a street cart, the chatter of pedestrians. Reality. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number I had memorized over the weekend. Dr. Aris, a crisp voice answered. This is Harper Hayes. I dropped a sample off with your lab tech 2 days ago, under an NDA. Ah, Ms. Hayes. Yes, I have the preliminary toxicology report in front of me. The doctor's voice shifted, dropping its customer service cheeriness, becoming heavy and clinical. I have to ask, where did you acquire this smoothie? My grip on the phone tightened until the metal edge bit into my palm. A health food store. Why? You need to throw it away immediately, Dr. Aris said, and I strongly advise you to contact the authorities. The sample contains heavily concentrated doses of thallium. The street noise seemed to fade into a dull roar. Thallium. Tasteless. Odorless. Soluble in water. Historically used as rat poison. It attacks the nervous system, causes hair loss, damages the kidneys, and liver. It mimics a dozen natural degenerative diseases. It was the perfect, cowardly weapon. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice cracking. I sounded like a terrified little girl. I hated the weakness in my tone, but the reality of the word was a physical blow to the chest. Positive. The concentration in that single cup wouldn't be fatal on its own, but ingested over weeks or months, it would cause severe, irreversible organ failure. Eventually, death. Eventually, death. Thank you, doctor. Please send the certified report to the secure email I provided. I hung up the phone. I didn't immediately turn into a stone-cold mastermind. I didn't laugh maniacally. I walked over to a brick alleyway between the boutique and a coffee shop, out of sight of the main street, and I dry heaved. My stomach clamped down, twisting into violent, agonizing knots. I braced my hand against the rough, dirty brick wall, gasping for air. The smell of garbage and stale urine filled my nose, grounding me in the filthy, ugly reality of the moment. They were actually doing it. Again, the knowledge that I was right didn't bring satisfaction. It brought a profound, devastating grief. Christine was my blood. When our mother died, I had braided her hair. I had paid for her college. I had shielded her from our father's demanding temper. And she was hand-delivering rat poison to my desk with a smile on her face. I stood in that alley for 10 minutes. I let the tears come, hot, angry, humiliating tears that ruined my mascara and burned my cheeks. I let myself mourn the sister I thought I had and the man I thought loved me. I let the Harper who had died in that hospital bed have her final moment of weeping. Then I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve. The rough fabric scratched my skin. I pulled out my compact mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. I dabbed away the smudged makeup, took a deep breath of the city air, and walked back into the boutique. Christine was waiting in the lobby, dressed in her tennis skirt again. "Everything okay?" she asked brightly. "Perfect," I said, my voice steady as bedrock. "Just a minor logistical issue. It's been resolved." Thursday night. The rain hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment like handfuls of gravel. The city below was a blur of smeared red taillights and gray concrete. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, completely surrounded by paper, bank statements, routing manifests, union grievance reports, and front and center, the certified toxicology report from Dr. Eris. The word thallium was highlighted in blinding yellow ink. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. The sheer volume of Tristan's theft was staggering. He wasn't just skimming off the top. He was actively gutting the West Coast infrastructure to fund a private equity firm registered in Christine's name in the Cayman Islands. They weren't just going to take Hayes Logistics. They were going to hollow it out, bankrupt it, and walk away clean. The lock on my front door clicked. I froze. I hadn't changed the locks yet. I didn't want to tip Tristan off that the dynamic had shifted so drastically. "Harper?" Tristan's voice echoed in the cavernous entryway. He walked into the living room, shrugging out of a wet trench coat. He held a brown paper bag, smelling strongly of garlic and expensive Italian takeout. He stopped dead when he saw the living room floor. I didn't scramble to hide the papers. It was too late, and the pile was too massive. I simply sat there, cross-legged in my sweatpants, looking up at him. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, broken only by the violent lashing of the rain against the glass. His eyes darted over the documents. He was smart enough to recognize a Hayes Logistics internal audit folder from 10 feet away. He recognized the red tabs marking the dummy LLCs. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dropping the charming boyfriend cadence. It sounded hollow, defensive, Just catching up on some reading, I said flatly. He slowly set the takeout bag on the glass coffee table. The smell of marinara sauce suddenly made me nauseous. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing, trying to assess how much I actually understood. Harper, we talked about you overworking yourself. You're diving into departments you don't fully comprehend. You're going to burn out before the wedding. He reached down to pick up a folder, the one containing the Cayman Island wire transfers. My hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. My grip was shockingly tight. The physical contact sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated revulsion through me, but I didn't let go. His pulse beat rapidly under my fingers. He wasn't calm. He was terrified. "Don't touch that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a venom I didn't know I possessed. Tristan stared down at me, his amber eyes wide with genuine shock. He tried to pull his arm back, but I dug my fingernails into his skin. "Harper, let go of me. You're acting insane." "Am I?" I released his wrist abruptly, pushing myself up off the floor. I stood toe-to-toe with him. He was a foot taller than me, but for the first time in our relationship, I saw him flinch. "I comprehend perfectly, Tristan. I comprehend that Pacific Freight Solutions doesn't own a single truck, yet we paid them $4 million last quarter for hauling services." The color drained entirely from his face. He looked like a corpse. That is an authorized subcontractor," he stammered, scrambling for purchase on a crumbling cliff. "Your father signed off on the vendor list." "My father signed off on a vendor list you curated," I interrupted, taking a step toward him, forcing him to back up. "You exploited an old man's declining health to bleed his life's work, and you put the shell company in my sister's name. Did you think I wouldn't run the tax ID numbers?" He hit the edge of the sofa. He had nowhere else to retreat. The mask was completely gone now. The handsome, charming fiancé melted away, leaving a desperate, cornered rat. "You don't know what you're looking at," he sneered, his voice turning vicious. "You're a marketing girl, Harper. You throw parties and pick out fonts. You have no idea how the real world of corporate logistics operates. I built that West Coast hub. You robbed it," I countered, my chest heaving, the anger burning away the last remnants of my fear. "And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I am presenting this entire file to Anthony Pendleton and the legal team." Tristan's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck stood out like thick cords. He looked around the room, assessing the situation. It was just the two of us. The rain outside was deafening. I saw the exact moment the calculation in his head shifted from corporate defense to physical threat. His eyes darkened. He took a sudden, aggressive step forward, closing the distance between us. He reached out and grabbed both of my upper arms. His grip was brutal, his fingers digging into my biceps. "You are not going to do that," he said, his breath hot against my face, smelling faintly of the scotch he must have had before coming over. "You are going to gather up all this paper. You are going to put it in the shredder, and you are going to let me handle my department." Pain flared in my arms, but I didn't wince. I looked dead into his eyes. "Let go of me, Tristan." "Or what?" he challenged, shaking me slightly. "You're going to ruin everything? I am the best thing that ever happened to you, Harper. Without me, you're just a sad, lonely heiress, playing business." He was trying to break me down, trying to find the insecure girl he had manipulated for 5 years. But she was dead. She died coughing up fluid in a hospital bed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I brought my knee up, hard and fast, directly into his groin. The impact was a solid, sickening thud. Tristan let out a high-pitched, strangled gasp. His grip on my arms vanished as his hands flew down to protect himself. He folded in half, his knees buckling, and crashed onto the hardwood floor, landing heavily amid the scattered bank statements. He curled into a fetal position, groaning in absolute agony, his face pressed against a routing manifest. I stood over him, my breathing ragged, my arms throbbing where his fingers had bruised the skin. The adrenaline was a roaring river in my ears. I looked down at the man who had ordered my murder, writhing in pain on my living room floor, and felt nothing but a cold, heavy disgust. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up the bag of Italian takeout, and dropped it squarely onto his back. "Leave your key on the counter," I said, turning my back on him. "And if you ever touch me again, I won't just take the company. I'll take your freedom." Friday morning tasted like stale toothpaste and exhaustion. I hadn't slept. I spent the night sitting on the floor of my locked bedroom, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, waiting for Tristan to come back with a weapon. He didn't. When I stepped into the shower, the hot water hit the bruises on my upper arms. They were blooming into ugly, mottled shades of violet and yellow, perfectly shaped like male fingerprints. I stared at them, the steam curling around the glass door. They weren't just injuries. They were leverage. I dried off, pulling on a structured, high-necked black dress that completely hid my arms. I applied concealer under my eyes with a heavy hand, masking the dark, bruised circles of insomnia. I didn't look like a glowing bride-to-be. I looked like a widow. That felt appropriate. At 7 a.m., the corporate headquarters was a ghost town. The air conditioning was running on high, making the empty corridors feel like a meat locker. I bypassed my office and walked straight to the executive suites, slipping my key card into Anthony Pendleton's door. He was already there. CFOs never sleep. He was drinking black coffee and reviewing quarterly projections. He looked up, surprised, the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting off his wire-rimmed glasses. "Harper, it's early." I didn't say good morning. I dropped the heavy manila folder, the one containing the Cayman Island wire transfers, the dummy LLC registration, and the certified toxicology report, directly onto his keyboard. "Cancel your 9 o'clock, I said. My voice was a dry, raspy croak. "Read it." Anthony frowned, annoyed by the intrusion, but he opened the folder. I watched his eyes. I watched the annoyance shift to confusion, then to deep, furrowed concern, and finally to stark, blood-draining horror. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sharp rustle of him turning the pages. "This is..." Anthony touched his mouth, his hand trembling slightly. "The Cayman accounts. They're registered to Christine, but the transfer authorizations, these are Tristan's override codes. He's been bleeding the West Coast expansion for 8 months, I said quietly, taking a seat across from him. The leather chair felt cold. He's preparing to bankrupt the division and push for a private equity buyout, which he and my sister would conveniently fund. Anthony flipped to the last page. The toxicology report. He read the highlighted word, thallium. He looked up at me, his face entirely gray. "Harper, what is this?" "That is my sister trying to ensure I don't live to see the wedding," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I was too tired to cry. "I want them gone, Anthony. I want the police. I want the SEC. And I want them escorted out of the anniversary gala tonight in handcuffs." Anthony took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He wasn't a man of action. He was a man of ledgers. This was messy. This was a scandal. "Harper, if we do this publicly, the board will panic. The stock will plummet. If we don't do this publicly, They will spin it. I leaned forward, resting my palms flat on his desk. Tristan is a sociopath. If we fire him quietly, he will sue for wrongful termination. He will go to the press and say my father lost his mind, and I'm a hysterical, jealous fiance. We have to sever the limb completely, in front of the investors, so there is no doubt why he is gone. Anthony looked at the thallium report again. He swallowed hard. Okay, I'll call the precinct captain. We play it normal until the speeches tonight. I nodded and stood up. As I walked to the door, Anthony spoke again. Harper? I paused. I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick with genuine pity. I truly am. I didn't turn around. Pity felt too much like the hospital room. Just make the call, Anthony. At noon, Christine walked into my office. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer, looking like she was playing dress-up in corporate clothes. She held a clipboard, her face pulled into a mask of tight, forced cheerfulness. Hey, she said, hovering in the doorway. Tristan called in sick today. Did you guys have a fight? She was fishing. She needed to know what happened last night. Just pre-wedding stress, I lied smoothly, not looking up from my monitor. He had a bit too much to drink. He'll be fine for the gala tonight. Christine exhaled, a tiny, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. She stepped further into the room. I also checked the mini fridge. You threw out the smoothie I brought you. There it was, the thinly veiled accusation. I finally looked up. I met her eyes. They were wide and blue, identical to our mother's. It made my stomach physically churn. It went bad, Christine. The milk separated. I dumped it down the sink. Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Oh, okay. I'll just make you another one tomorrow. Don't bother, I said, offering a small, dead smile. I'm changing my diet. The St. Regis ballroom was suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume, roasted duck, and melting ice sculptures. 500 people packed the floor, a sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. It was the exact scene from my nightmare, playing out in real time. I stood by the ice sculpture of the company logo, a glass of club soda sweating in my hand. Tristan arrived at 8. He looked immaculate in a black velvet dinner jacket. But the illusion shattered when he got close. His face was pale, pulled taut over his cheekbones. He was moving stiffly, favoring his left side. The knee I had driven into his groin last night had left a lingering, agonizing reminder. He didn't approach me. He stood on the opposite side of the room, near the bar, watching me like a hawk. Christine was glued to his side, whispering furiously into his ear. He swatted her away like a fly, his eyes never leaving my face. He didn't know what I had done today. The uncertainty was eating him alive. At 9 o'clock, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the main stage. Anthony Pendleton stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted, the clinking of silverware fading into a low hum. Anthony gave the standard financial welcome, praising my father's legacy. Then, he looked directly at me. And now, stepping into the role of interim COO, the future of Hayes Logistics. Harper Hayes. The applause was polite, wealthy, and muted. I walked up the steps to the stage. My legs felt heavy, like I was moving through waist-deep water. The glare of the spotlight blinded me for a second, washing out the faces in the crowd. I gripped the edges of the wooden podium. The wood dug into the bruises on my arms. The pain anchored me. "Thank you, Anthony," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed off the high, gilded ceiling. I looked down into the front row. Tristan was there, standing next to my father. Christine was a few feet away. Tristan's hands were stuffed into his pockets, his jaw locked. Hayes Logistics was built on trust. I started, the words coming out slow and deliberate. My father built a network of drivers, warehouse managers, and partners who relied on transparency. We moved things from the dark into the light. I pulled a small black remote from my pocket. I pointed it at the AV booth in the back of the room and pressed the button. The massive projection screens flanking the stage flickered to life. They didn't show the Q4 marketing projections. They displayed a massive, high-definition spreadsheet. It was the Cayman Island Wire Manifest. At the very top, in bold black letters, was the name, Pacific Freight Solutions, LLC. Registered owner, Christine Hayes. Authorizing officer, Tristan Vance. The room went deathly silent. It wasn't a cinematic gasp. It was the ugly, uncomfortable silence of 300 rich people realizing they were witnessing a very messy, very illegal car crash. Transparency is difficult when the people closest to you are stealing from you, I said, my voice rising, cutting through the heavy air. Over the past 8 months, my fiance and my sister have embezzled $4.2 million from the West Coast expansion. Harper, shut off the mic, Tristan shouted. His voice cracked in panic. He lunged toward the stage steps, abandoning the calm facade entirely. She's having a breakdown. Cut the mic. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind the velvet curtains near the stairs. Detectives. They didn't draw weapons, but they physically blocked Tristan's path. Their hands resting ominously on their belts. Tristan slammed into them, staggering backward. He looked wildly around the room. The exits were blocked by uniformed officers. The trap was sprung. But corporate theft wasn't enough, I continued, my hands shaking so violently I had to grip the podium harder to keep them still. I pressed the remote again. The screen changed. It displayed the toxicology report from Dr. Eris. The word thallium glowed in neon yellow across the screens. 2 days ago, my sister delivered a drink to my office laced with heavy metals. Thallium. Rat poison. I looked directly at Christine. She was frozen, her mouth open in a silent scream of terror. Because simply taking the company wasn't enough. They wanted the inheritance, and they didn't want to share. That's a lie, Christine shrieked, the sound tearing through the ballroom like tearing metal. She backed away from the stage, her high heels catching on the carpet. I didn't do that. He gave it to me. Tristan gave me the powder. He said it was a diet supplement. The entire room turned to look at Tristan. The betrayal was instantaneous. There was no honor among thieves. Tristan spun around, his face purple with rage, pointing a shaking finger at Christine. You stupid bitch! You put it in your own name, he roared, completely losing his mind. You set up the LLC. I didn't sign those transfer papers. She forged my authorizations. They were screaming at each other in the middle of a black tie gala, throwing each other to the wolves to save their own skin. It was pathetic. It was loud, ugly, and humiliating. I stepped away from the microphone. I didn't need to say anything else. The detectives moved in. One grabbed Tristan by the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him, face first, onto a cocktail table. Glasses shattered, champagne spilling across the white tablecloth like a cracked artery. The metallic, heavy snick-snick of handcuffs clicking into place echoed clearly in the silent room. Another officer grabbed Christine. She didn't fight. She just collapsed, her knees giving out, sobbing hysterically into the thick carpet, her expensive mascara running down her face in ugly black rivers. I stood on the stage and watched them drag the man I loved and the sister I raised out the double doors. I waited for the rush of triumph. I waited for the sweet, intoxicating taste of vengeance. It never came. I just felt tired. So incredibly, bone-deep tired. The aftermath of a bomb going off isn't exciting. It's mostly just ringing ears and sweeping up the glass. A month passed. The weather turned bitterly cold, stripping the trees bare and freezing the city sidewalks. The scandal hit the financial papers, causing a 3-day dip in Hayes Logistics stock before Anthony and I managed to stabilize it with an aggressive restructuring plan. Tristan and Christine were denied bail. The combination of grand larceny, wire fraud, and attempted murder made them extreme flight risks. I went to visit them once at the county lockup. I didn't go to gloat. I went because I needed to see it for my own sanity. Tristan was behind thick, smudged plexiglass. He wore an orange jumpsuit that was a size too large. The arrogant, bespoke-suited executive was entirely gone. His hair was greasy, his face pale and drawn. When he picked up the heavy black telephone receiver, his hand shook. "Harper," he croaked. His voice sounded like dry leaves. "Please, I'll give it all back. Just tell the DA to drop the attempted murder charge." I didn't know what it was. Christine bought it. She told me it was a laxative to make you lose weight for the wedding. He was still lying. Even now, trapped in a concrete box, he was trying to spin the narrative. I looked at him. I looked for the man I had agreed to marry. I looked for the phantom memory of his lips on my forehead in the hospital room. It was gone. He wasn't a mastermind. He was just a greedy, desperate man who thought he was smarter than he actually was. "You're going to prison for 20 years, Tristan," I said into the receiver. My voice was calm. It wasn't angry anymore. It was just stating a fact. And the money you stole is already back in the company accounts. You built nothing. You are nothing. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I didn't stay to watch him cry. I didn't visit Christine. I couldn't. I paid for a high-end defense attorney to ensure she got a fair trial because she was still my mother's daughter. But that was the absolute limit of my grace. I deleted her number from my phone. I boxed up the photos of us as children and put them in a storage unit. I severed the corrupted limb so the rest of the body could survive. On a Tuesday evening, exactly 2 months after I woke up on my bathroom floor, I sat in the COO's office. My office. The room smelled of lemon polish and fresh rain hitting the window panes. The heavy oak desk was covered in operational reports and routing manifests. I had fired the corrupt managers on the West Coast, renegotiated the union contracts myself, and stabilized the supply chain. I leaned back in the leather chair, staring out at the gray, towering skyline of the city. I pressed my fingers against my throat, right over my carotid artery. I felt the steady, strong rhythm of my pulse. Thump, thump, thump. My lungs expanded, pulling in a deep, clean breath of air. There was no rattling. There was no fluid. I reached for the glass of water on my desk and took a long sip. It tasted like water, just cold, clear water. The taste of copper was finally gone, and that is the end of Harper's brutal, calculated return from the brink. She didn't just survive the poison. She fed it right back to them in the form of cold, hard justice. Tristan and Christine lost the money, the company, and their freedom, tearing each other apart in the process. If you love this deeply human story of betrayal and corporate vengeance, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend. Let me know in the comments. Did Harper go easy on them by just sending them to prison? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? See you in the next story.